Hi everyone, welcome to Medical Microbiology. Today we will discuss chapter 22, which is the fungi of medical importance. So when you talk about fungi, we actually will only discuss the microscopic fungi, which is the very small fungi that can cause infection to human. And there are two types of microscopic fungi. The first one is mold, okay? And mold, it has structure which is consists of long cell, it's called the hyphae. And the second one is called the yeast, which is mostly consists of kind of oval cell. Sometimes it's just one cell. Sometimes they also combine into several cells. But that combination is not as long as the molds. Okay, so molds consist of combination of many cells that making a very long structure is called the hyphae. Okay, so they are widely distributed in air, dust, vomits, which is non-living object that has been touched by someone that carry the pathogens, and some of them also actually our normal flora. Humans are relatively resistant against fungi infection, but there are some fungi that can cause infection even to healthy humans. So most fungi, they are actually non-pathogenic, so most of them are free living, and many of them is actually beneficial for humans, for like in biotechnology to produce food, drink like wine and alcoholic beverages, bread, yogurt, use fungi to produce this type of food. There are about 100,000 fungal species. Only 300 of them had been linked to disease in animal, including humans. Fungi is actually most common plant pathogen. So many of them actually causing problem to uh, plants. Human mycosis are caused by true fungal pathogens and some opportunistic pathogens. So there are two types of fungi that can cause disease to human, which is true pathogen and opportunistic pathogen. True pathogens mean the fungi that can cause disease even to healthy humans. The opportunistic pathogens usually only cause disease to people with compromised immune system, with lower or weaker immune system, like for example, children, older people, or maybe uh, people that have disease like AIDS. So these are the representative fungal pathogens. We start with the first one, which is the true pathogen. Again, the true pathogens mean the pathogen that can cause disease even in healthy people. So the primary true pathogens, there are four of them. Okay? The first one is Histoplasma. The second one is Blastomyces. The third one is Coccidioides. And the last one is Paracoccidioides. And the name of disease that caused by this fungi usually follow the name of the species. Okay, like for example, Histoplasma causing disease called the Histoplasmosis. Blastomyces causing disease called the Blastomycosis. The Coccidioides causing disease called the Coccidioidomycosis. And Paracoccidioides causing disease called the Paracoccidioidomycosis. Most of these infection usually on the respiratory tract infection and also skin infection. So we'll see these true pathogens one by one later. The next groups is called the pathogen with intermediate virulence. So it is not as bad as the true pathogen, but it has some virulence that maybe can cause disease to some healthy people. Okay? Some of them, okay, like Sporothrix SCHENCKII, mostly causing skin infection, and the disease is called the Sporotrichosis. Others like Microsporum, Trichophyton, Epidermophyton, eh, most of them causing disease on the skin. It's called the Dermatophytosis. So mostly skin infection. And the last one, the last group is called the opportunistic pathogen. So this opportunistic pathogen, they usually will not cause disease to healthy people. However, they can cause disease to people with weaker immune system. Examples are Candida, causing disease called the Candidiasis, Aspergillus, causing disease called the Aspergillosis, Cryptococcus, causing disease called the CRYPTOCOCCOSIS, Pneumocystis, causing disease pneumonia, Pneumocystis pneumonia. Usually, this is one of the identifications of disease for AIDS people. So most of people that have AIDS, they also will have this type of pneumonia. Other group, okay, other species or genera like Rhizopus, Absidia, and Mucor, causing disease called the mucormycosis. Okay, we start with the first one. So we're gonna look one by one. Okay, the fungal pathogen. The true or primary pathogens, again, the one that can infect and grow in healthy, non-compromised hosts. Right? This is the pathogen that can cause disease to healthy people. Uh, Most of these primary or true fungal pathogen, they have the ability to switch their structure or their form from hyper, okay, from the long structure when they live outside the host body, okay, and then they change into yeast cell when they invade the host cell or the host tissue. So they have this ability to switch their structure or morphology from mold, okay, to yeast. This is what we call the thermal dimorphism. So dimorphism is mean that the ability to change their morphology based on the temperature. So when they live outside the human body or the host cell is about 30 centigrade, they will be in the form of mold. Okay? But when they enter the human body, stay in the tissue, maybe in the lungs, for example, and usually human body, normally it has 37 centigrade or 98 Fahrenheit. Okay? So when they enter the human body, then they can change their form into yeast. Okay, so this is what we call the thermal dimorphism. Okay, this is how it look like again outside the body, which is around maybe 30°C. So they are in the form of hyphae or molds. When they enter into the tissue, the host cell, then they change. Usually this is around 37 Celsius, okay, degrees Celsius or centigrade, and they change into the yeast form. Okay, so this is again thermal dimorphism. Now, the profile of these true pathogens, we can see one by one. Again, Histoplasma capsulatum, mostly causing disease in the respiratory system. So this is a respiratory tract infection. The name of the disease called the histoplasmosis, sometimes also called as Ohio Valley fever. The second one is Coccidioides, causing disease called the Coccidioidomycosis, mostly in respiratory system, skin. Okay, they can also enter to the nervous system, causing meningitis, and they can enter to the circulation, causing what we call the fungemia. Okay, fungemia mean uh, fungi in the blood circulation. The next one is Blastomyces, causing disease called the Blastomycosis. Again, mostly will be respiratory tract infection plus skin or cutaneous infection. Paracoccidioides, causing disease called the Paracoccidioidomycosis. And again, it is also mostly respiratory tract infection and with also skin infection. Sporothrix, pulmonary sporotrichosis. So this is respiratory tract infection and also skin infection called the cutaneous sporotrichosis. Madurella species causing skin infection called the Mycetoma. Some dermatophyte mean the pathogens that mostly causing disease on the skin. So derma, okay, derm mean skin. So they mostly causing skin infection called the ringworms infection because the skin will have infection like a ringworm like this. Okay, so this is the dermatophyte causing a ringworm infection, skin infection. Candida is called the Candida albicans, which is white color. Eh? It can cause, if it is in the mouth, it can cause thrush. Eh? If it is in the uh, genital tract, it can cause vulvovaginal candidiasis, mostly in female, and it can also causing the esophageal and anal infection. The next one is Cryptococcus, causing pulmonary cryptococcus, coccosis, which is respiratory tract infection, and they can also causing the meningitis in the nervous system. Pneumocystis CE, and again, this is one of the signs, okay, for people with AIDS. So people with AIDS disease, they usually have this infection caused by pneumocystis, and the disease is called the pneumocystis pneumonia. Okay, this is one of the indications of AIDS for people with AIDS. Aspergillus, mostly causing aspergillosis in the respiratory tract, in the lungs, and also can cause ocular infections in the eyes. Okay, what are their pathogenesis? We start with the portal of entry. Okay. So as you see from the table before, most of the fungi causing the respiratory tract infection, especially in the lungs. So therefore, the primary portal of entry will be respiratory portal from the nose, from the air go to the nose, which is mostly due to the inhalation of the spores of the fungi. So these spores are really dangerous when it is enter into the lungs. The second will be subcutaneous, and this is skin. So the portal of entry will be the skin, and also cutaneous and superficial skin infection. So the portal of entry will be also the skin. The virulent factors, remember virulent factors mostly enzymes and toxin plus some other characteristic. Okay, in this case, okay, the virulent factors for fungi, first is thermal dimorphism, which is the ability to change their morphology, their structure from molds into yeast inside the host tissue. They also produce toxin or toxin-like substances that able to destroy some host cell. They also have capsule that make them able to protect against white blood cells of the host. Some adhesion factor, which is attachment factor, they have the ability to attach to the host cell. Enzyme, okay, remember enzyme. And there are also some chemical that stimulate the inflammations on the host tissue. So these are several virulent factors of pathogenic fungi. Uh, the host, okay, our body has some defense mechanism Remember, we talked about this defense mechanism in previous chapters. Like, for example, the non-specific one, like the integrity of the skin, the mucous membranes, and also the cilia that presence in the respiratory mucosal cell. So these are some non-specific defense mechanism that our body produce in order to protect against the fungi. Phagocytosis, this is going to be the second line of defense, and also inflammatory responses, the second line of defense. The third line of defense, sometimes the long-term immunity, okay, can only develop to some true pathogens. So for most of the pathogens, like the intermediate and opportunistic fungi pathogen, our body usually will not develop the immunity, because we will not be able to produce the memory cell against these fungi. It is the reason also, the vaccine for fungi is very rare, because we unable to produce the memory cells for fungi infection. Okay, the fungi disease mostly, okay, in general is called the mycosis. Okay, so mycosis mean fungi infection. There are several level of infections and also degree of the pathogenicity. The true pathogens, again, remember there are four of them. Mostly they causing this is the dangerous one, which is systemic infection, mostly in the uh, respiratory organs, okay, like the lungs. That's the most dangerous one. They can also can cause disease skin infection that may be subcutaneous, which is under the skin, the cutaneous in the skin layer, and maybe just superficial, the top layer of the skin. So this one will be the least dangerous one. Okay, so the least dangerous type of infection. And the most dangerous one will be the systemic infection, mostly in the lungs. For the opportunistic mycosis, they are also causing some infection, whether systemic, subcutaneous, cutaneous, or superficial. Again, if we look at the diagrams over here, so superficial infection is on the top of the skin over here. This is what we call the superficial infection, which is not that dangerous. And then under that is gonna be the area is called the cutaneous infections around this skin area. The subcutaneous infection will be under the skin area. It's going to be mostly in the connective tissue under the skin. Eh, So we start with the systemic infection, which is the most dangerous type of infection. For the true pathogen, they are mostly endemic. Endemic mean only in the specific regions in this world, in this place, okay, in the world. So it's mostly endemic. Okay? Uh, Infection mostly causing by the inhalations of the spore, especially the non-sexual spore is called the conidia. And then the spore will germinate in the lungs and causing distractions in the lung tissue. So it's become a systemic type of infection. The spore can also inoculate the skin, causing the skin infection, whether superficial, cutaneous, or subcutaneous. So the top one is called a superficial infection, and then under that, in the skin itself, is called the cutaneous infection. And if it is under the skin, the connective tissue under the skin is called the subcutaneous infection. Okay. So most of these true pathogen, they can produce immunity. So most of the uh, true pathogens can cause the host tissue to develop the immunity. This is histoplasma cycle. They're mostly present on the soil. So these fungi produce the spores, and one of the spore, the non-sexual spore, is the conidia. It can be inhaled by these humans and then will enter into the system, mostly in the lungs, and in the lung it will change into the yeast type of fungi. Okay, so from hyphae or molds over here outside the body and change into the yeast form inside the lung, and then it will cause the lungs infection. Is destroying mostly the lung tissue, and it can also carried by the blood system into other organs. Okay, so like nervous tissue may be causing the meningitis, go to the kidney, bones, GI tract, intestine, liver, and also the heart. So this is the first true pathogen, the histoplasma, or also known as the Ohio Valley fever. So mostly so this is endemic, mostly in the eastern and central region of United States. Therefore, it's called the Ohio Valley area. So this is Ohio Valley fever. The treatment usually using amphotericins. This is a fungal medicine, itraconazoles, and also maybe surgery to remove the pathogen from the host body. So this is the cycle. You can read this again. Again, it starts with the conidia that is inhaled and then finally change into the yeast form in the lungs, causing the lungs infection. Is called the histoplasmosis, and it can also carried by the blood to other organs. The second one is Coccidioides immitis, causing disease called the Coccidioidomycosis, which is also lungs infection. eh, Mostly in the endemic area, southwest United States. And the one that is inhaled is the arthospores. This is also spore, a type of spores. Maybe inhale from the dust and then go to the lungs, causing the lungs infection. Okay, coccidioidomycosis. Treatment usually using the amphotericin type 4, This is skin infection, cutaneous infection of the valley fever or coccidioidomycosis. Okay, so this is the skin infection that is caused by this coccidioidomyces. Coccidioidomycosis, this is the one that attack the lungs. And again, the spores can be inhaled from the soil. So they usually live, the fungi usually live on soil and produce the spores, and the spore can be carried by the air and inhaled by a healthy person, and it will enter into the lung and causing the coccidioidomycosis. It might also go to other organs like these bones, and also to the nervous system, causing the meningitis. If it is in the bone, causing disease called the osteomyelitis, and in the skin, it's called the skin granulomas. Okay, the next one is Blastomyces, causing disease, mostly skin infection. Okay, is Dermatitidis, and this is also known as North American Blastomycosis. Okay, so if it is, so again, mostly they live in the soils, in the Midwestern and Southeastern United States. The spore may be inhaled, and then it can cause infections, include the symptom of this infection include cough and fever. It can also causing the chronic cutaneous infection, bone infection, and nervous system complication. The treatment, mostly the same, using the Amphotericin B and the azole drugs. So these are the fungal drugs. And this is example of the cutaneous skin infection caused by the blastomyces. It's called the disease called the blastomycosis. Okay, the skin infection. Okay, the last true pathogen. Okay, number 4 is Paracoccidioides, causing the disease called the Paracoccidioidomycosis. Again, this is dimorphic. It can change from mold into the yeast inside the host body, mostly in the Central and South America, like Brazil. They have this type of fungi that causing infection. And again, the primary infection is a respiratory tract infection, which is lung infection through the inhalations of the spore. They can also causing skin infection and some lymphatic organ infection. The treatment usually using fungal drug like ketoconazole, amphotericin, and sulfa drugs to treat the paracoccidioidomycosis. Eh, the systemic infection. Now we go to the second most dangerous type of infection, which is the subcutaneous infection or mycosis. This is going to be in the uh, connective tissue under the skin. Okay, some of them that causing this disease are Sporotrichosis, Chromoblastomycosis, Mycosis, Mycetoma. We're gonna see how it look like. Start with the first one, Sporothrix SCHENCKII, and the disease is called the Sporotrichosis, or sometimes it is also known as ROSE-GARDENER'S disease, because mostly it is caused by the infection through the gardening, because they have the spores. The fungi live in the soil, and the spore might inoculate to the skin and causing this type of infection over here, this rose gardener disease or sporotrichosis. It might also go to the lungs, causing the lungs infection, and some uh, lymphatic organs infection. The next one, the one that causing the subcutaneous infection, is chromoblastomycosis and also phyo, pyohypomycosis. Uh, Chromoblastomycosis is a progressive subcutaneous infection. Again, mostly fungi live in the soil. They produce the spore, and the spore can inoculate the skin or maybe inhale to the respiratory organs. Example of this, Fonseca pedrosi, Pialophora verrucosa, and Cladosporium caryonii. They produce very large, thick yeast-like bodies. Okay, so this is a dimorphism, causing the skin lesion and abscesses. Again, they can also spread into the bones, brains, and the lungs. This is examples of subcutaneous skin infection, Mycetoma. This is a progressive skin infection. This is a tumor-like disease. So it's progressive mean they spread from one place, one infection area spreading into other part of the skin. So this is a progressive uh, type of infection if it is not uh, treated carefully. This mycetoma caused by the Pseudallescheria and also Madurella species. Okay, the next one is cutaneous infection. This is less dangerous compared to the systemic and subcutaneous. There are 39 species that can cause cutaneous infection: Trichophyton, Microsporum, and Epidermophyton. Many of them give a very specific type of skin infection. It's called the ringworms infection due to the shape of the infections on the skin that look like ringworms, like this. Okay, so most of this disease have a shape like a ringworm, so therefore it's called the ringworm infection. Like trichophytons, okay, it can cause ringworm infection to the scalp, which is on the head, to the body, the beard, and also nails. The Microsporum can cause ringworm infection on the scalp, and Epidermophyton can cause ringworm on the groin area and on the nails. Okay, so this is ringworm on the scalp. Yeah, it's called the Tinea capitis. Ringworm on the beard is called the Tinea barbae. Ringworm on the body is called the Tinea corporis. Yeah. Ringworms on the groin area is called the Tinea cruris. Ringworm on the nails is called the Tinea unguium. Okay, and ringworm on the foot is called the Tinea pedis. On the hand is called the Tinea manuum. Okay, so this is on the face, ringworms, infections on the face. So you might be able to see the ringworm shape if you see it closer. So treatment usually using topical drugs like Lamisil, Griseofulvin, and this is a chronic, so it's going to be needing the long-term applications. It can use also the surgery, yeah, on the skin, and using also UV light treatment to kill or destroy the ringworms. The last one is the superficial mycosis, and this is not dangerous, but it is annoying because mostly these white patches over here is very itchy. So it's causing itch, especially when you put when you are sweating, because sweat has salt, eh, sodium chloride on it, and then it can increase the itchiness on the skin. So usually you see the white patch and the symptom like itchy on that area. Okay, so mild chronic scaling, molting in the skin, so white piedra caused by the Trichosporon begii. So whitish or color mass develop in the scalp, pubic, and axillary hair. Okay, so you should be able to see the skin of the people that have this type of superficial infection. Again, it is not fatal, but it is annoying type of disease. Now we're going to talk about a little bit about the emerging fungal pathogen. It means that the opportunistic pathogens, mostly they are free living, but they can cause disease to the people with the weaker immune system. Uh, Now we're going to compare a little bit before we talk about the opportunistic pathogen, the difference between true pathogens and the opportunistic pathogens. Okay? The virulent factor for the true pathogen is very developed, so they have toxin, they have enzymes, they have the ability to attach to the host tissue and causing problems on the host tissue. The opportunistic, they have a limited virulent factor, therefore they usually will not cause disease to healthy people. Condition of the host, resistance high or low. The resistance is low. It means that when these people have a weaker immune system, they will they might have the opportunistic infection. Primary route for the true pathogen, remember, mostly the respiratory tract organs, so through the inhalation of the spore. For the opportunistics, some of them through the respiration, some through the skin. Okay, nature of infection usually pulmonary. Okay, because this is the respiratory tract infection. For the opportunistics, mostly skin infection, and some also pulmonary infection. The immunity for the true pathogens, usually we will develop the immune system, the immunity for that true pathogen. But for the opportunist pathogen, we usually do not develop the immunity. If we do, usually very weak type of immunity and short life. Then the agents that causing the disease, mostly the inhalation of the spore, the sexual non-sexual spore is called the conidia. For the opportunistic, maybe the spore, conidia, or the uh, the fungi itself, which is the mycelia or the hyphae. Thermal dimorphism, yes, for these true pathogenics. So they have the ability to change their morphology from molds into yeast inside the host tissue. For the opportunistic, they do not have the ability to change their morphology. Habitats mostly soil for the true pathogen. For the opportunistic pathogen, maybe soils and some other source, like maybe the human itself, because many the opportunistic pathogens are actually normal flora that live on our skin, on our body. Geographic location, again, mostly for the true pathogenic, they are endemic only in the specific regions. While for the opportunistic, this is world-life distribution. Okay, now we start with this again, opportunistic pathogens that increase the infection. The most common one is Candida or Candida. Uh, this is causing thrush in the mouth or maybe vagina or vaginal candidiasis. Okay? Aspergillus. So Aspergillus sometimes is used for making food. Okay? Uh, they can also causing disease to the weaker people with the weaker immune system. Cryptococcus. Some zygomycota species, so they can cause some disease to people with lower immune system. Okay. Again, the most common one is Candida, and then Aspergillus, Cryptococcus, Alternaria, Phaseolomyces, Fusarium, Rhizopus, uh, Torulopsis. Just for your information, this Aspergillus and Rhizopus, it also used to make food in some tropical area. So they use this fungi to ferment the food and produce the new type of food. Okay. Okay, start with the Candida albicans, again in the mouth, causing the thrush infection. Okay, this Candida also accounted for about 70% of nosocomial fungal infection. So this is the most common nosocomial fungal infection. So remember, nosocomial mean the infection that caused by staying in the hospital. So this is the disease that usually uh, transferred during hospital stay. Okay. Treatment usually using topical antifungal like azole and polyenes. For the systemic, using amphotericins and fluconazoles. Cryptococcus neoformans causing skin infection like this. Okay, it's called the cryptococcosis. And again, mostly it will infect people with the weaker immune system, like AIDS patients, people with cancer, or maybe with diabetes. So they will be prone again this disease. For healthy people, they usually will not cause problem. Eh? Pneumocystis xerophaecae. Again, this is disease that mostly causing disease to AIDS patient. Okay? So this is prominent opportunistic infection in AIDS patient, and this is one of the indication of disease for people with AIDS. So type of pneumonia. Treatment may be using sulfamethoxazoles or trimethoprim. The next one is Aspergillus, causing disease called the Aspergillosis. Okay? And the most type of species of Aspergillus that causing this opportunistic infection is Aspergillus fumigatus. It might be cause infection to people with AIDS, leukemia, which is cancer, and people with lower immune system, immunodeficient patient. These fungi also involved in allergies and toxicosis, okay, toxication. The infection mostly in the lungs and also maybe in the skin, in the eye, in the ear. eh, In the eye can cause conjunctivitis. It might cause necrotic pneumonia, infections of the brain, the heart, and other organs. Systemic, using combination of drug therapy. Mucormycosis. This is examples of skin infection caused by the uh, group of this group. Okay, that consists of Rhizophus, Absidia, and Mucor species. Okay, it can cause skin infection and also can attack the heart, the brains, the eyes. And again, it's only mostly will cause disease on people with the weaker immune system or with chronic disease like diabetes. People with the malnutrition can also have a higher risk to get this infection. Okay, and the last one is miscellaneous opportunists. This is any fungi that can be implicated in infection when the immune defense is or are severely compromised. Like for the AIDS patient, they usually have a lot of opportunistic infection. Example for this miscellaneous opportunistics are Geotrichum candidum, can cause disease called the Geotrichia Coccidioides. The molds usually found in the soils and maybe in the dairy product, mostly secondary lung infection. The fusarium is also in the soil. It can infect the eyes, the toenails, and burn skin infection. Okay. Fungi can also cause allergies and intoxication. So they can causing this problem too to some people. The fungal spores, this is the common source for atopic allergy for some people. It can cause the seasonal allergy and also asthma. Farmer's lungs is also caused by this type of infection. The toxin that's produced by the fungi can cause what we call the mycotoxicosis, usually caused by ingestion of the toxin or maybe inhalation of the toxin. One famous toxin is called the aflatoxin. They usually develop related to the corns, the grains, peanut. So if you store the peanut or the corn or the grains on a very humid place, it might be there might be some fungi that live on this peanut or corn on grain, and they can produce the aflatoxin. So if someone eat this corn or peanut that contain the aflatoxin, then it can be actually lethal. Okay? It can cause the toxication. Stachybotrys cartarum. This is also known as six building syndrome. It can cause severe hematologic and also neurological damage. So these are the some allergies and also intoxication that might be caused by the fungi. Now the epidemiology of the mycosis, again, most of the true pathogens, they are endemic. They are spread on the specific area. Okay? With the geographical patterns, the climate, and the soil. But for the opportunistic pathogen, they usually spread worldwide. So this is examples of the four true pathogens of this fungi, which is Histoplasma, Blastomyces, Coccidioides, and Paracoccidioides. If you see the Histoplasma mostly in the area, okay, Midwest Ohio Valley area, okay. For the Blastomyces is also in the eastern and mid-central of United States. Coccidioides mostly on the western, southwestern part of United States. And the Paracoccidioides mostly it is in the South America. Right? So they are related to the soils and the climate where these fungi usually live. So this is a very endemic type of distribution. So diagnosis for fungi infections usually require some microscopic identification by staining the specimen or culturing in a specific media, and also using the biochemical and serological tests. So antigen antibody testing that we learned in chapter 17 before. Control for mycotic infections. Again, immunization mostly not effective. Uh, it is progression of making the vaccine, but again, for the opportunistic fungi, they usually it's difficult to create a vaccine for them. Only the true pathogen that usually have the vaccine, in this case, Coccidioidomycosis and Histoplasmosis, there are some development on vaccine for this type of fungal infection. Preventions using masks or maybe protective clothing when performing like gardening or maybe mowing the gardens to reduce the inhalations of the spore or maybe also the inoculations of the spore into the skin. For some disease, sometimes need surgical removal of the tissue that is damaged by the fungal infection. For the drugs or medicine, usually using amphotericin. This is the most common type of drugs for fungal infection, using nystatin. eh, In the azoles type, maybe imidazoles or triazoles. Some other type of drugs also, naftifin, terbinafins, Lamisil. So this is usually topical skin drugs. So Lamisil is a topical, okay, but terbinafine can also taken orally. Right? Other drug use, caspofungins, anidulofungin, and micafungin is also used for fungal infection. Griseofulvin, this is mostly for what we call the athlete foot, the stubborn infections on the foot. Okay, fluoxetosins can be also used for fungal infection. I think that's all for chapter 22. So we still have one more chapter before your final exam, which is chapter 23, about parasites, okay, protozoa and also helminths or parasitic worms. So I'll see you again on chapter 23 lecture. Goodbye now.